welcome to today's masterclass. I'm Jake Smith. I'm our content strategy manager at Crunch, and today we're going to cover how to ace your Crunch free accounting software. So at Crunch, we've been looking after all sorts of small businesses for 10 years or more now, and we build our own software. And this year, just at the end of 2020, in fact, we launched Crunch Free, which is our sort of entry level bookkeeping, but it's incredibly powerful. It's effectively about a third of the software that you would get if you were on one of our complete accountancy packages. Obviously, the superhero client managers and expert accountants don't come with the free software, and nor does the filing for taxes. But hopefully, I think about 80% of people who were on this call said that they'd already logged into Crunch Free before. So hopefully you've got some idea. But what we're going to do today is we've got Luke Young, our client education specialist. He's an absolute guru at using our software. He's been a client manager in the past and is responsible for all of the great material, videos and how-to articles that are in our help center. And my team in Crunch, we look after all of the social and community and content. So all of the articles that are in Knowledge, hopefully the stuff that you found useful. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Luke to just talk about what we're going to cover today.
Lovely. Thanks, Jake. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. We'll look at the what I would call the basics of setting up your account and getting it ready so that you can use the features and functions in the best way possible. So we'll look at setting up your account, so adding your business details, uploading a business logo so that you can attach that to an invoice. We'll look at the banking section, so that will be adding your bank account, and also we'll touch on open banking. So that's a really powerful feature which I'd strongly recommend everyone checks out as soon as possible. It's completely free, and I'll go into a bit more detail on that when we get to it as well. We'll look at creating suppliers so that you can record your expenses, some quick wins when recording them, so looking at an app called Snap and setting up recurring expenses. And then we'll look at setting up your clients so that you can start to send and create your invoices in your Crunch free account. We'll touch down briefly on reconciling, time permitted. I don't want to chew your ears off all day, but we may actually do a separate class about that because we want to make sure that you're able to nail it as well. So we'll see what we can do with that one. And we'll also have a look at the help center. So what it is, how do you find it as well. So without any other delay, let's get stuck right in. So first of all, make sure that you are of course logged in. I know that a lot of you probably already are or have done in the past. And if this is your first time with Crunch Free, you're probably seeing a page that looks exactly like this. So if this is your first ever login, this is what you're greeted by. So in the top left, we've got a sort of a welcoming message. This will give you a general idea of where to begin. So add your bank account, and then of course check out the getting started material as well. That's really comprehensive, by the way, so that will literally walk you by hand through the entire process. So check that out if you want written step by step. In the right over here, you've got a dynamic card that changes. So each time you log in, you'll be greeted by something different. And this will just highlight some of those additional services like Snap that I mentioned just a moment ago. And it will change to other things like Trip Catcher. And just keep your eyes on that because there might be something there that catches your attention and could really help you out. Underneath, you've almost got almost like a chronological order of things. So you need to add your bank account, you need to upload your logo, add your clients and so on. The two that I would deem as the foundation though are these two here. So adding your bank account. Without a bank account, you're not going to be able to record your expenses and you're not going to be able to send invoices. So absolutely make sure that you include that as one of the first items. Or you could even upload your business logo first. It doesn't really matter which way round you do these two, but just make sure you're doing one of the other first. So as with most accountancy kits and most softwares in general, you do have account settings that you can customize. So if you go to the top right, it'll probably say your business name. Select that and go to settings. And then from here, you can begin personalizing some of your details. So you can change your business name, if you've got a registered address, your trading address, whether you're VAT registered, your business logo that I mentioned earlier. And lastly, you can also export crunch data as well. So if you need to take out specific information, like your expenses or your sales invoices, you can absolutely do that from there. But let's go ahead now then. Now that we've got a sort of general idea of where those settings are, let's go ahead and actually set up that bank account that I mentioned earlier. So if you go to banking, as seen over here on the left, go to accounts and cards, this menu item here. And what you're seeing is probably this. If it's a brand new account, this is what you're greeted by. If you've already attempted to create your own bank accounts, that's fine. You'll still have the option to create a new one down here in the right. So from these two options, add a bank account, that's for current or savings accounts. And then if you've got a credit card, of course, use that option instead. But in this example, I'll just go ahead and set up a new current account. So I'll press this button here. The display name, this is just for your own reference, okay? So if you end up with multiple bank accounts, you can use this to differentiate between which accounts is which. So I can make it as simple or as complex as I want, so I'm just going to keep it super simple and call this one current. If I then set up a new business bank account that was also a current account, I could perhaps even be, I don't know, if I wanted to be super, I could just put something like that, for instance. It's entirely up to you, all right? So make that as simple or as complicated as you want. The bank is just who you're banking with, so this is the provider. So we'll go ahead for HSBC. Now, the opening balance is really important. So if you're just starting and you've only just opened up a bank account, the chances are this is going to be zero. Okay, so you may not necessarily need to change anything. If you're joining partway through a year though, or you've had a set of accounts that have been done in the past and this is now your second or your third year, whatever it might be, the opening balance will be different. So what you'll need to do is go back to the very first transaction at the start of your business year. So look at your bank statement and then put that figure in here. So whatever the very first transaction is at the start of your business year, you need to put that figure in here. And this is so that it aligns from one year to the next, okay? And then that way you're making sure that all your accounting records are accurate and it's just a continuation from the previous to the new, okay? Next up, it'll actually tell you as well, because when you sign up, you have to put in the start of your business year. So keep your eyes peeled on that, and it'll actually tell you the date that you need to look for. So go for the very first transaction on that date as it appears on the statement. Next up, you just need to specify that it is a business bank account. Whatever you do, put your own personal bank account information in here. You've got to have a business bank account, and that just means any account that's got your business name on it in that respect. So if you've got, 3-4 business bank accounts, put them all into this as well, because they'll all need to be accounted for. So I'll go ahead and confirm that it is a business account. I'll also need to confirm that it's a pound sterling only account. And then next up is just the sort code and account number. Now, this is simple enough, right? But make sure that you are putting the exact sort code in. And this ties nicely into the open banking mention, because the system will actually recognize sort codes that have an open banking feature available. So I'll go ahead and put one in now. And then if I go ahead and save that, this now gets added to my accounts and cards section. And the more bank accounts you add, the more cards that just get added as well. So I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and I'll create a credit card just for something different. So now that you've got a card here, go down to this icon down here and select new credit card. Similarly to as before, just enter some basic info. So name of the card, last 4 digits, and then again, you've got the opening balance scenario. So again, that still applies. So make sure that you're putting in the exact number there. And then again, just confirm these two and press save. Okay. So now as you'll see, this adds to the stack. So you've got the bank accounts, which is your current and savings accounts. And then you've got your credit cards underneath. Now, going back to the sort code mentioned earlier, you'll see that this has a little icon here. So this card in particular has got an icon here. It's because the system's looking at the sort code and going, okay, well, I recognize that. I know that there's an open banking feature available. So open banking, just to give you a short and sweet version, is a integration feature that will allow your bank statements to be automatically uploaded into your Crunch account each month for you. So all you'd need to do is press connect your bank, have a quick look over the conditions here, tick that, press connect your bank, and then this will take you through to the authorization form. Now, each bank is going to have its own steps, so this will be unique to however it is that your bank handles open banking, but it's a completely free service, so it's absolutely worthwhile checking out and getting it set up as soon as you can, really, because this will really help you reduce your administration time. If you can't have open banking, don't worry, you can still upload manual bank statements. You just need to download a CSV file and then you can import it. But I have to admit, it's a little bit fiddly. Sometimes they come as XLS versions, which you then have to convert. Sometimes the formatting's a little bit skewed on some of them. So again, if the feature is there, it's free, use it. Absolutely use it, and then you'll be absolutely whizzing through bank reconciliation in no time. So we'll try and touch down a bit more on bank rec a bit later. So once you've got these two included, or all of your bank accounts, however many it is that you've got, you've probably, if you're just starting out, got some formation costs, business startup costs, for example, that you want to include. So you might need to backdate some of your expenses. So in order to do that, just go to expenses over here. Now, my first bit of advice to you, it's probably really tempting to just go to expenses and then just start, doing things that way. But make sure that you've got your suppliers set up first, because then when you create your expenses, you'll have a list of people to choose from. Now, a supplier is someone that you buy goods or services from, or a business that you buy goods or services from. So it's actually far easier to just go to suppliers and then just start creating them. There probably is some regular expense items that you're going to have, like travel, public transport, maybe food items, software licenses, domain, cloud hosting, that type of thing. So just go ahead and add all of these first. So you can do that by going to the bottom right hand corner, and then all you've got is these two pieces of info. That's all you need. So the name, again, is just to help you identify what that expense is. So if I wanted to keep it super simple, I'm going to go with food. Now, the reason that I'm putting in food and I'm not just listing all of the places that I buy things from is because you don't need to. You can have generic suppliers for your everyday items like food, or even travel. You could just create a supplier called public transport if you use trains and buses and taxis, and then just put all of your expenses under that one supplier. So all I'm going to do is keep this as food. I now need to specify what the expense type is. So I'll go with subsistence, and then I'm going to go ahead and press save. Now I'll create another one, and I'll do travel this time. Again, I'm just going to put public transport, and then I'm going to pick public transport from this list. And you can just keep doing that. If you wanted to have one for software, just create it for the software provider and choose the expense type that's relevant. And now in a matter of seconds, I've got 3 suppliers that are set up and waiting for me to start logging expenses against. So now that I've got those, I can start recording them. So I'm going to go to the expenses tab over here. I want to go to create an expense, or if you've already got some and you've created some in the past, just use this button down here instead. And now I've got my list that I can pick from. So I'm going to use this, and you'll see all of those are there. If you have forgotten a supplier, don't worry, you can still actually create suppliers through expenses. It's totally fine. Let's go with Adobe in this example. You then specify the date. You'll notice you can't go forward, but you can go backwards. So if you are backdating expenses and things like that, that's fine. Go back as long as you need. You can attach a file, so receipts, things like that as well. Just use this button here. You can drag and drop them. So if you've got your documents open, just drag it off and drop it into there. It's fine. You could also add a note. So this is just another means of identification. So if, let's say, I used public transport and I actually wanted to specify the journey itself, I could absolutely do that. Just type it in there, and then that will be included on the expense as well. Okay, so I'll go back to Adobe in this scenario. You've got a couple of other options that I'll touch on very briefly. Now, you can make this chargeable to a client, and what that means is if your end client is going to pay you for an expense, so you've done a service for them, but perhaps they're going to pay for your travel while you do that service, you can actually attach the expenses to the invoices as well. So all you'd need to do is, let's just do it. Let's just go ahead and do it for public transport. And then I'm going to say, right, who am I going to charge this expense to? Okay, I want to attach it to an invoice that I create for this client. And then you put the details in of the expense. And then when you raise your invoice, that will be attached to that invoice for you. So that's just a nice to know. You know, some of you may not use this ever at all, but just be aware that it is there. And then lastly is just adding a reference, very similar to the note option. It's just another way of you further distinguishing what the item is. If you did want to go into a little bit more detail, absolutely fine, you can do that as well. So I'm happy with the basic information about the supplier here. All I now need to do is start entering the info about the expense. So in this section, I just need to add a description. So let's say that this was travel card or something like that. And you'll see that the expense type has actually chosen itself for me. And that's because of the way that I have set up this supplier in particular. So if I change this to food, you'll see that also changes to subsistence as well. So that's why I was saying just set up your suppliers first, because then you're saving yourself a little bit of work and letting the system choose the correct types for you. So let's quickly change that back. You'll also notice that the VAT rate sets itself for you as well. So for public transport, it's automatically determined that it's 0. If I change this back to Adobe, it changes it to standard. So I haven't got to sit there and work out whether VAT is applicable or not. However, if for any reason you do need to change the VAT rate, you absolutely can. Okay, so don't worry, you've still got flexibility when it comes to setting the VAT rate when you need to. You know, for things like food, for example, if you end up paying a reduced VAT rate due to the current circumstances, you can select that. So don't worry, the option is there for you. Now I'll leave that as it is for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and just put the total amount in here. Now, if this did have VAT, it would then add the VAT cost on as well. So if I quickly show you now, go to Adobe, you'll see that this has changed. I now put the total in, and over here, you can see that it's actually split the VAT element for me as well. So just make sure that you are putting the total cost in, all right? So you don't have to work out what the VAT aspect is. Let the system do the work for you, okay? So I'll quickly change that back, and then you'll see that that now disappears and updates as it should do. Lastly, it's just the payment info. So how is it that you're paying for the expense? When did you pay for the expense? You'll notice these two dates are the same because most of the time you're going to pay for something simultaneously when buying it. However, if there is ever a delay in the payment, so, you know, yes, I did purchase it on the 1st, but the money didn't come out of my account until a day or two later, change it. Absolutely fine for you to do that. Okay, see, the original date stays the same, but this now matches up when the money actually left your account and shows up on the bank statement. Lastly is just picking the payment method. So did it come out of your business bank account? Did you perhaps pay for it personally? So just make sure you pick the right one. If you choose business bank account and you've got more than one account, use this drop down menu here. If you have actually used your own personal account, use this one here instead, and it will tell you that you have personally paid for it. So I'll go ahead and leave that one as it is for now, actually. If you are backdating and you're going through like expenses in batches, let's say you've got another transport expense that you want to add, rather than going backwards and forwards between the different screens, just use this button down here, save and add similar. It will then populate a lot of the information already for you, and it's just a case then of changing things like the date, the payment date, the description if you want, and the amounts. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'll go ahead and save it, and now we've got both of these added to our account. So we've got the rechargeable one and we've also got the one that we just created as almost like a replica in that case. If you ever needed to edit or fully delete any of these items, use the pencil icons here to edit, the bin icons to delete, and if perhaps you are wanting to create similar expenses again in the future, use this button here and you can just create another like this again. Okay. The last thing I'm going to show you on expenses is recurring, because this is such a big time saver. So if, for instance, you've got direct debits, you've got standing orders, you've got regular items like a subscription, for instance, for a license, why create things manually when you can just set the system up so that it automatically does it for you? So for that, go to recurring expenses, select create a recurring expense, or use this button down here again. And now you can start to set up a schedule for those expenses. So choose your supplier. So this time I will go with Adobe, because I'm going to say that I've got a monthly cost for a license. So I want it to repeat once a month. You can change this to years, days, or weeks, up to you. When do you want it to start? You'll notice that this time I can set it in the future. So let's say I arranged a direct debit for the 15th, and now I want to specify when it's going to end. So you can either leave it as a constant recurring, you could specify when it ends on or after. So I'm going to say on, I'm going to skip ahead a few months and say that that's the final time that I want it to create. Again, you can also use the additional bits and bobs as well if you need to, like you can with normal expenses. Let's just say this one is a software license. It's chosen software, it's picked the right VAT again, and this time I'm going to put in a monthly cost. I'm telling the system that I'm paying it out of the business account, the current account, and then I go ahead and press save. This has now set up a schedule so that you can see it's for Adobe, it's for this amount, it's an active schedule. So once this the end date passes, this then becomes inactive, and you'll see that there as well. But you can also see that I now have the next event appearing on here. So make sure you set those up as well, like I say. So do suppliers first, then take a look perhaps at setting up your or adding your backdated expenses, formation costs, business costs, etc., and then go ahead and start setting up your recurring expenses. And then that way, all you're really updating in your records is your you know, things like food items, or if you buy the odd bit of equipment every now and then, you know, so you're making your lives a bit easier in that respect, the more that you can get the system to do the work for you. Next up, let's take a look at sales then. So what I guess likewise with suppliers, it's probably best to go ahead and start adding your clients first. You know, chances are you might only have one when you first start out, and that's fine. But if you are again backdating or you're joining partway through, or you've had previous years, go through this list and add these guys in first. So go to sales, clients, and in the top right, just press new client. You've then got to enter some basic info about them. So company name, that can also be an individual, by the way. I know it says company, but don't let that put you off. You can put a person's name in there, that's fine. So let's say I'll go with Google. I can set a default invoice currency. So this is when I raise an invoice for Google, the invoice is automatically going to have this currency set. You've got a handful of different types that you can choose from if you need to. Your payment terms is just how long you're giving them to pay you for the service. The default is 28 days, but change that if you want to, totally up to you. Email and website isn't a requirement. That's just if you want to include something like Google's website or your client's website, whatever it might be. Again, don't worry too much about that though. The important thing in truth is this section and this section here. So your contact details, this is really important to enter this correctly, because this is how you're going to start invoicing through your Crunch account. So how you're going to start sending them. So let's say I put in John Smith and put in their email there. Telephone and role isn't important. You can ignore that, put it in if you wish to, but just make sure that you're checking this box here as well, including email. So if you're happy with that, move on to billing address. If you are working for a large organization like Google, and perhaps you do one service for John Smith and then you do a different service for another department, just keep adding different contacts in, but you can house them all under that one main client. This way you can start sending different invoices to different departments without having this long old list of, you know, Google John Smith, Google Jane Smith and everything like that. So that's just something to consider. You can delete contact details just using this button here as well. Okay, so I'll keep it as just the one for the time being. Billing address is their trading address. So this is where they're operating from. This is where you're going to send the invoice to. So I'm going to make one up now, by the way, but make sure you put the right one in. Okay. Sales invoice note, it's totally up to you whether you want to include this. It could just be something like, you know, a thank you note. It could be your website info. It can be whatever you want it to be. Again, not essential, so you can leave that unchecked if you wanted to. The one that I would deem essential is, of course, the bank account details. Make sure the box is checked and make sure that you have chosen the bank account you want to be paid into. So these actually get attached to the invoice when you send it to them. So they'll know exactly which account to pay into. And then lastly, again, this isn't a requirement, but it is a really nice to have, actually, a late payment reminder. So firstly, it can save you having those awkward late payment conversations. You know, if it's a few days overdue and you're wondering where on earth your money is, you can set this up so that it automatically starts chasing clients for you. So if I wanted to, let's say my invoice is now 2 days overdue. So I'm going to set this to 2. So by the second day of it being overdue, the system's going to start churning out automatic reminders to that client. You can then set continual reminders as well. So I want it to start 2 days after the overdue date and then 2 days thereafter, continually until my invoice gets paid. You can either give yourself a gentle reminder, which I know a lot of people will do, because then you can sort of send out your own personal message on email to them and reach out that way, and that's fine. Or if you do want to let the system just do all of the work, you can send it to yourself and also to your client as well. So I'll keep that one just as myself for the time being, and then I'll go ahead and press save. That client has now been created. So let's go ahead and create a new invoice for that client. So go back to sales, invoices. In the top right hand corner, you have this button here. If it's your first time, you'll have this option as well. It makes no difference, use either. Go to new invoice. And like we saw with expenses, it's a very similar type of form. So who is it that you're invoicing? So pick your client from this menu. If they're not there, don't worry, you can still create a new client using this button here. You'll see that it's now brought through the business address for them. It's also kept the currency that I chose as well. Now I just need to determine, right, when am I issuing this invoice? So you can either do it on the day, or if you're backdating and you're just using Crunch3 for bookkeeping purposes, use the calendar, and then you can go back as far as you need to as well. That's fine. So I'll keep that as today. Client referencing, you know, if I don't know, maybe if you're self-billing or anything like that, you can put your own unique invoice numbers in, that's fine. If you've got a specific numbering system that you like to use, just drop that in there. Payment terms, as we see, have carried over. And then you've also got some invoice line item options. Now, the two that are worth pointing out is this one here, simple. So this will just allow you to create an invoice with an overall cost. So if I now press add line item, put a description of what the service is, and then if I add, let's say, £1,000, you'll see that all it's doing is just giving me a gross total of £1,000, right? If, however, I wanted to charge in maybe a rate or an hourly quantity, just get rid of that, go to detailed, press add line item again, same as before, put a description of the service. Now you can put in your rate, and you can also put in the quantity, and that will then do the maths for you as well. And so just be mindful of that, you know, depending on how it is that you're charging, both of those options are perfectly viable and available. If for any reason you needed to edit anything, use the pencil icon here. If you needed to delete it and remove it, as you probably saw a minute ago, use that red X icon. If, let's say, you wanted to add a discount for whatever reason it might be, use the add discount button, could put a description of what it's for in there, pop that in there, and then this will deduct from the cost. So when you send the invoice out, both of these will be shown. So both lines will be shown on the invoice as well. As we go down, we can see that these two are already here because of the way that we set up that client a moment ago. So I'm quite happy with this, and I'm going to leave it as it is. If you wanted to disable maybe the late payment reminders, just uncheck the box and it will go away. And then if you wanted to bring it back, just check it again. So super simple, super quick. Lastly, you can upload files. So if for any reason you did need to attach supporting documents, maybe you needed to attach a receipt, for instance. So let's go back up and then I'll show you the recharge. So if I now change this to Crunch, okay, I'll keep the same info in here, so the currency, the date, etc. You'll see that this button now becomes available, and that's because it knows that there's an expense for this client that I need to attach. So I'll go ahead and just add my line in, and then say that it's for 1,000. Okay, and now I'm also going to attach that expense. As we can see, there's my transport. Okay, put a description in here, and then you can also include the expense information as well for further support on the fact that you pay for it. So there we go. There's the extra detail. So the date, who it was for, and the description as well. So nice and easy, that one. So if we go down now, we've got save as draft and preview and issue. A save as draft is basically it's an editable invoice. It's not actually an official document yet. So you've got the opportunity to make changes. You can even use drafts to send out quotes and estimates as well. So just be wary of that. You know, if you've got a new client that's sort of umming and ahhing and they just want to test the waters on your cost, save it as a draft, and then you can download it and email it to them as a quote instead. If you're happy with it though, go to preview and issue, and you'll get a summary here of what the invoice is going to look like before you send it. If you do spot a mistake at this point, don't worry, you can still edit it because technically it is still in draft stage at this moment in time. If you're happy with it though, you've got two options: issue and email, which is the one that I'm going to select. So this is how you start to use Crunch to send your invoices to your clients for you. Or if you are just backdating and doing a bit of bookkeeping and don't need to send it, just issue it instead, okay? So I'll go ahead and issue an email. You'll then get a few additional options here. So who is it that you want to email it to? Do you want to change the subject line? Do you want to change the body content of the email? Perfectly fine. You know, this is a dynamic field as well, by the way, so it will update so that this invoice number then reflects in this subject line as well. So I'm happy with that. I'm just going to go ahead and press save and send. There we go. That's now confirmed that the invoice has been created, it has been sent, and it is now showing in our invoice list. Now you'll see these status labels throughout. When you start to send your own invoices and build your account, you'll see outstanding, overdue, and paid. Okay, so this would just give you an idea of what's remaining and what's settled on the account. So if let's skip ahead and say that actually I have been paid now, and I need to record that the payments come into my bank account, go back to sales and invoices and find the invoice in question. So in this example, it's this one. Go to the options menu on it and simply press record client payment. Now, by doing it this way, there are a few ways that you can do this, by the way, but this is easily the best method of doing it, because this way you're recording the payment directly against the invoice in question. So you won't then end up with scenarios where you've got money recorded in the account, but it doesn't know which invoice it's for, and then you've got to do some backwards and front. Just use this method as best as you can, as often as you can. So if I now press create client payment, you'll see it's got the client there already, it's got the currency already. All I've actually got to do is say when I got the money paid in. So today, how did I get it? Well, it's paid into the account that I requested, and that's selected here. Did you receive the full amount, which again is populated here for me, and it's also set the money against the invoice for me already. So you can see there's nothing outstanding. I've got the full amount. Okay, now let's say in a different scenario, let's say I only received partial payment for it. Let's say it was a bit of an oversight and they only gave me £1,000, so I'm 100 quid short. All I then need to do is press amount received, change that to 1,000, make sure that this number matches this number, so I'm only allocating £1,000 to the invoice. And then if I go ahead and save this now, this still shows as outstanding because I've still got 100 quid to be paid on it. So again, let's skip ahead another few days and say, okay, yeah, they've sent me the money now. Again, as before, go to options, record client payment, and this time put the date again, the method. You've got the £100 that was outstanding now allocated to it, as shown down here as well. Go ahead and save. Now your invoice has been marked as paid in full. So yeah, that's easily the best way of doing this. Let's say in another different scenario where you've received a bulk payment. So let's say you've received 10 grand, but it's across 3 different invoices. Okay. All you then need to do is make sure that the 3 invoices are listed here separately. Go into client payments, go to new, record the fact that you've received £10,000, pick the client again, and then all 3 of those invoices will be shown down here as outstanding. So using the allocated field, you can just split the money between the 3. So this number will then reduce by the amount that you put into each field. And then that way you can cover multiple invoices with one single payment. So that's just something that's probably worth bearing in mind, because I know that that can happen from time to time. That's probably it with sales and invoicing, to be fair. Oh, I guess lastly, you've got recurring options as well. So like with expenses, if you are, if you're working through an agency or you've got timesheets or anything like that, and it's the same cost at the same point of the month, just set yourself up a recurring invoice schedule. And then that way you can just let the system start doing all of the work like you do with expenses. So that's a really, really handy feature. I guess lastly, the other couple of points I wanted to raise is bank reconciliation. So I'll quickly go over this because bank rec's actually really, really simple. I know that it can be quite daunting for a lot of people, but it's just a case of matching your bank statement entries to the data that you're entering into your account. So if you can set up open banking, this makes this whole process so painless, because all you've then got to do is go to match your entries, and it's just a case of going, okay, well, this is my statement entry, this is my crunch info, and I'm just going to sync the 2 together. Now, I'm not going to go into that during this session purely because it does almost deserve its own class in its own right, because while it's super simple, I want to make sure that we cover every aspect of it, and that includes if you encounter any problems with it as well. And I don't think I'd be able to do it justice if I just quickly skim through it like everything was perfect. So we'll cover that in a different session. The last few bits that I do just want to make sure that you see are any of our additional services. So if, for example, you want to check out our marketplace, go to add-ons in the bottom left-hand corner. You've got things like speaking to an accountant. You can book an hour's worth of their time. You've got business bank accounts if you're thinking of setting up a new one, investments. There's all the mobile apps, Crunch Snap. Crunch Snap's actually really helpful. I'd recommend checking that out. That's a receipt capture. So if you download the app for your device, you can just take a photo of the receipt, sync it to your Crunch account, and then it will start being uploaded to your account for you. Likewise with Trip Catcher for business mileage. So those are definitely worth checking. And as you can see, there's a lot here. I'm not going to chew your ears off on all of them, but do make sure that you check it out when you get the moment. And then the final bit of advice is our help center. So in the very, very bottom left, I appreciate it might be a little bit hard to see, is this button here, can we help? So if you press this, you'll get a little bar that pops out here, and then you can actually search our entire range of help center articles from this particular box here. If you wanted to read an article, find it, press it here. This will then open it up into a new window, and then you can start reading all the info. So that will be things like guides, step-by-step walkthroughs, videos, anything like that. it's all there. You know, I can almost guarantee you, if you've got an issue and you want to find out how to do something, it's going to be on that help center. So definitely get that bookmarked and check it out. You've got the collection of walkthrough videos here. And then lastly, you've got some info about our community pages. So that's probably it from me. Obviously, we'll have a look at your questions if you've got any as well. So I'll pass you back over to Jake now. But thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you have found it helpful, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day as well.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you. There was one question that I thought it might be worth covering off now, because it's probably quite a common question, but I've not actually been asked it before, so hopefully you know the answer. But some people have bank accounts, and when they're using that bank account, it might get tested by someone, might put a 1p
Yeah.
charge through to make sure that the account is verified. And Milesh has just asked the question, how do I actually account for this? What do I do in terms of reconciling it and
So
recording it?
it's probably easier because it's money that just comes in and straight back out, isn't it? It's almost like a credit check, I suppose, isn't it? It's like penny in, penny out type scenario. There's two ways you could do that in truth. You can either just simply record it as a bank deposit and then counteract it as with a withdrawal. So record the money going in as a bank deposit and then the money going back out as a withdrawal, and that will create what's called a nil balance. So they'll both just cancel each other out. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. The other option would be to create it as a refund. But in this type of scenario, for such a small amount of money, it's probably more work than's needed. So I would just say bank deposit, penny in, and then create a withdrawal from the money going back out, and then you'll find yourself back at nil again. So that's the easiest way of doing it. Otherwise, creating a refund. Unfortunately, I haven't got time to show you that today. I'd love to, but if you do want to create a refund, jump onto the help center, and there's an entire step-by-step guide on creating the refunds there.
Okay, great. We did have another question from Milesh, which was just about when you actually need to submit accounts. Crunch-free is just our free software. If you actually want us to act as your accountant, prepare accounts for you, submit them with HMRC and all of the extra things that are in our complete packages, then please take a look at our complete accountancy packages. The subscriptions bit that Luke's showing you there in the top right will show you the products that we have available. We don't offer one-off service of accounts production at the moment. With Crunch-Free, we're not acting as your accountant. In order for us to actually prepare accounts and submit them to HMRC, we would need to be appointed as your accountant. And the only way you can do that is with a monthly subscription. Crunch-Free also, all of the support for Crunch-Free is via our help center. So there aren't, you don't get a client manager to help you through with things, but we're going to touch on this later. Luke, I don't know if you want to. We have got a feedback button on the section at the moment, but so if we just talk about what we've covered today, we talked about updating business details, adding a logo if you want to. I'm not sure whether we touched on it. The logo has a restriction on the size of it, but not the dimension. So you just need to make sure your logo is less than 200K in order for it to, and then it'll appear on your invoices. We've added bank accounts, looked up setting up open banking. With open banking, there are about 12 or 13 banks that we support at the moment with our feeds, which cover, we think, about 80 or 90% of our 10,000 paid clients. So hopefully your bank will be covered. If it isn't covered, as Luke said, there are manual ways to get your things in there. We talked about new suppliers and recording expenses in a variety of ways, setting up new clients and sending sales invoices, and then we briefly touched on reconciling your account. Now, what we are going to do is we'll have a follow-up masterclass in the next month or so, where we cover off bank reconciliation in a bit more detail, and we also obviously touched on the help center. If we have any other questions that I haven't been able to cover with this, we will make sure that we get back to everyone. But I just wanted to lastly touch on these useful resources. So the Crunch-Free Help Center, you access from within the software, just the bottom left of any page, can I help? Can we help? We'll always open up the Crunch Free Help Centre, but this is also a link directly to the Crunch Free Help Centre. We've got our Crunch Knowledge articles. There's about 500 articles that my team produce and keep up to date for you all, with all sorts of information on how to set up and run a business and be more tax efficient. So that's at crunch.co.uk/knowledge. We've got our social channels. So we're active on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. We've also got a Crunch Chorus Facebook group that I'd strongly recommend you join. And coming soon, just wanted to flag this one up for you. We're going to have a new Crunch community forum, which is using a bit of forum software. So it'll be a message board effectively, where you'll be able to hopefully get support from people just like you, ask questions about your business. Doesn't have to be just about Crunch Free, it could be about anything. There's about 2,500 people at the moment on our Facebook group, and it's really helpful. There's a good community going on there, so we're really hopeful that that's going to carry over into our community forum when it launches. But other than that, I think that is all we've got time for today. We've run over just by a few minutes. Mostly I've managed to cover the questions. As I said, any questions that I didn't cover, we'll make sure that we get back to you individually. We've got your names, and so we'll come back to the email that you registered with. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you're enjoying Crunch Free. Thank you very much to Luke for taking us through. It's fascinating to see how all the things that the software can do, and hopefully you got some good time-saving tips from Luke. But other than that, that's the end of the webinar. So thank you very much for attending.